All right, happy Thursday, April 5th, everybody. We're going to do a quick check-in on development tasks for Backdrop CMS, but before we do, we've got a couple of announcements. We have been contacted by the organizers of Drupal Camp Czechoslovakia. They have asked for speakers specifically on Backdrop, so if anybody is nearby or interested in traveling to Czechoslovakia, it would be great to get Backdrop spoken about there. We have slides if anyone wants to pull from our resources in order to give a talk. So that is still on the agenda. It looks like it is May 28th and 29th, so coming up here pretty soon. Anybody who wants to use Calabox, which is a local development environment, it's currently in alpha, and usually using an alpha version requires a special code, but they gave us a code for any Backdrop developers who want to try it and start using it with Backdrop. So if you have a link to the meeting agenda, we put the link for downloading Calabox in there, but basically when you try to download a copy of alpha, it'll ask you for a key code, and we have a key code specifically for Backdrop users. So if you want that, let us know or check the agenda and you can grab it. There might also be a link in the latest blog post, which is about Calabox as well, although I double check today and see if it's up there. We also have free PHP Storm licenses for anyone who's using Backdrop. So if you are a contributed group member, so the Backdrop CMS contrib group on GitHub, we can send you a link to download a copy of that software, which I think is good for a year. But if you are not yet in the contrib group and want to be and want to try PHP Storm, we can help you with that as well. And as always, if you would like to support Backdrop, you can go to our contribute page on backdropcms.org. If you make a donation for $25, we'll send you a thank you gift of an adorable dragon t-shirt. If you make a donation for $50, we'll send you an adorable, warm, comfortable dragon hoodie. We will have t-shirts and hoodies at DrupalCon next week, so if you want to try yours on in person, come track us down. I'll probably have a suitcase. You can just flag me down. Looks like I'm going or coming to the airport, but it's actually full of dragon swag. So that's if you're going to be there, it's a good way to get one. All right, big news from the Project Management Committee. We have elected a new core committer, and that's Jeff. So Jeff, I don't know if you want to say a few words, but this has been a long time coming. We're like, we need more core committers. We have a core committer. We need to figure out a process for setting up new core committers. Oh, we need a PMC. So it's been a while. Thank you for being patient, and thank you so much for being eager and willing to take on the responsibility. If you'd like to say a few words, we can turn it over to you.
I'd just like to say thanks, and thanks for making me a better developer. I'm honored. Thanks.
Yay. Okay, so next we should turn it over to Nate to give us an update on community growth. I know last week we had some kind of sad announcements where nothing had happened, but this week it looks like everything has exploded. So Nate, take it away.
Yeah, I also want to add that so Jeff and I went through the process of committing stuff early last week, and he's already merged like lots of stuff, and it's so awesome. It's like such a relief that it's like, oh yay, twice the reviewing and twice the committing power. This is huge. It actually is so huge. We probably, when we get to the marketing section, we should write up a blog post, because we actually, Jeff isn't our second committer, he's actually our third. Doc Wilmot's also a committer, but only in the documentation areas. So Jeff is our first full-fledged core committer, but the third overall. Very exciting. Yeah, community growth. Lots of great and very exciting things happening in the contrib world. There are 252 total projects for Backdrop listed on the GitHub contrib group. That's 14 new modules since last week, which is pretty incredible. Mostly, I think we owe our thanks to David, or DKN, for his exceptional effort there. He basically has a whole bunch of utility modules that he'd been working on porting, and he put them all into GitHub this past week, which was very exciting. He also did a great job of making a whole bunch of releases. There are 168 projects with official releases on backdropcms.org. That's 9 new official projects since last week, which is very exciting. There are 234 total releases for all projects, 10 new since last week, which is basically the 9 new projects plus 1 existing module had a new release, which is great. There are 53 total Backdrop Contrib authors, 1 new since last week, and that new person is Philip. Welcome, Philip, or on GitHub, WhitePH. And we're really excited to have you, Philip, and thank you so much for your work porting 5-star and voting API this past couple of weeks. I know it's been a little while coming, but it's really exciting to see those in the official repository this past week. We have 221 user accounts on backdropcms.org, 13 new users signed up for accounts since last week. So, yeah, a great week. Just all kinds of great new projects, great new releases, people signing up all over the place, plus a tremendous amount of activity in the core issue queue as well. With the release coming up in just 10 days, that's not surprising, I suppose. So we'll go right into infrastructure. The big item this week in infrastructure, we have a new thing that cropped up that kind of completely derailed our core review process this past week, and that's that Travis CI totally fell on its face last week, which was really frustrating and unexpected. That they moved us from their old infrastructure, which was on like physical iron, basically, to Google Compute Engine, and our testing times stretched like 6 times what they previously were. We went from 15 minutes to almost 2 hours in some cases for our tests to finish. But Travis cut you off after 50 minutes of processing, so all of our tests started failing everywhere. So I did, there should be a link in the agenda for that, but I did a ridiculous amount of reviewing looking for alternatives. But ultimately what we've done for the time being, because we really just need to get to release, or we need to be unhindered and focus until release, we just increased the parallelism that we're using on Travis. So instead of 2 builds, one for PHP 5 and one for PHP 7, we now do 6 builds. So we have 3 parallel tests on each version, basically. And it's still not as fast as before. Like previously it was like 15 minutes. Now it's like half an hour. So it's a little bit of a bummer that Travis had this like catastrophic change, basically, where I guess everybody just got a lot slower. They've been slower for a while because we've opted into the iron architecture for a long time. Well, in any case, it's fixed for the time being, but we're looking at all kinds of alternatives, self-hosting our own testing boxes, those sorts of things. But for the time being, we're going to stick with Travis, at least until the release. So there's an issue with the summary. I'll put the link in the agenda. So next item, usage statistics. Usage statistics and analytics finally fixed, for real. Yay. We've gone 2 whole weeks without any problems, which is really exciting. And so now that we've got all of our requirements met, there's no testing numbers skewing things in our usage statistics anymore. And they've been crunching successfully for 2 weeks now. And so I've made the usage statistics public now, so when you view any particular project on backdropcms.org, you can also check out its usage statistics. That information already was hardly secret at this point because Project Browser tells you how many installs each module has. So it was, I mean, it's a little bit silly to obscure it at this point. So that's great that information is now up and in public. We would like to extend the abilities of usage statistics, including the ability to start tracking features within modules, which is issue 99 in the backdropcms.org issue queue. And we'd also like to pretty up that usage page so it's not just a big table of information, which probably means adding a chart of some kind. And that's issue 98. If you're interested in prettying up that page a little bit, then look over there. That would be great to get that information in a little bit more digestible format. Drush for Backdrop is the next item. I'm not sure if there's anything new in the world of Drush, but Jeff, do you want to give us an update on anything new in the world of Drush?
Yep. On Calabox side, they added wget to the Drush container, so DrushDL works in Calabox now. Although I haven't tested that, but I believe them. but I will test it. New commands. Calabox folks want Drush SI. That would help with some of their spin-ups in Backdrop land. So that sounds like kind of a hard one, but I'll definitely take a look at that. And there's a new proposed command proposed by me to spin up boilerplate module code, which I think is useful in its current state. I guess we have one thumbs up. I don't see much harm in merging it, although I saw you have a comment, Nate, about probably a better way to respond to the arguments, I think. But I haven't looked at that since. But I think it will be a useful thing. If anyone strongly objects, I won't merge it, but I don't think anybody cares too much, but I think it could be useful.
Okay.
That's Drush.
I have a question. Is that something that existed in Drush for Drupal, like a boilerplate command?
No, it exists in Drupal console, which is where I got the idea, which they got from Symfony console, which I thought was a cool idea.
Yeah, I think that maybe I mentioned it at some point. There's a module for Drupal 7 called Module Builder that uses hook drush command to expose module building commands as well. So there has been something similar in Drupal 7, but it wasn't part of Drush itself. It was a contrib module.
And a Drush extension?
And a Drush extension, yeah. It was a module that provided Drush commands, which is a little bit weird because you had to like turn on the module in order for the Drush command to be there, which I can see why people probably wouldn't do that on most sites. I think it probably makes more sense as a Drush command first and then a module second, as opposed to the other way around.
Okay.
All right, cool. Next up is updates to backdropcms.org. Jen, do you want to take it away?
So I don't actually have any updates. I haven't done anything to the site in the last week, but I know Gore volunteered to take on the single sign-on task between backdropcms.org and GitHub, and I didn't know if you had any updates, Gore, on that, or if you had any questions. I haven't looked at that issue recently, but I could do that.
I can do a quick update about it. So it's pretty clear for me how to do so. I'm not going to use any extra modules. It will be an extendable module to already created GitHub API module. So I will use GitHub API to communicate with GitHub. And there is just only somebody needs to update me how exactly you want to see it on a website, where you want to put a button or how it should be looked like. And it's only one question about this. And I didn't get to that task because I push it on top of my task list right now about test environment. I'm doing a deep investigation on simple test module just right now in this time, trying to figure out why we so slow with the tests. So when I'm done with this part, or at least it will be clear what needs to be done, I will move to single to logging with GitHub, and then next task is integration, project integration with GitHub. Issues. It's about issues to show at least to show list of issues per country project on Backdrop CMS website. So it's a quick update about all these tasks. First thing that I want to finish is test environment, and then I will move to integration for logging, and then I will move to project.
That sounds great. The only question I have is if, like, other people, like, for example, if we have Backdrop camps and they also want to provide single sign-on with GitHub, they probably aren't going to be using the GitHub API module. So we should figure out if if there's a way for those things to, like, so that we can contribute back a GitHub single sign-on solution. I don't know how complicated that's going to be. But.
Well, GitHub API module here is only for integration at Backdrop website with the GitHub.
Right.
So it just collects all API requests or whatever required API requests. So if a camp is going to use Backdrop for single logging, then it will they need to hook up their own website with GitHub by itself and then create an ability to log in. So it's kind of a required part in the sense of not copying the same code from GitHub API to separated module to make Backdrop able to log in with GitHub access.
Okay. Well, I think that's great that you're doing it. I think we should, once we're done, we should maybe look at the code and see like how that would work from this perspective of Backdrop camp or something. But it might not be worth worrying about now.
No problem. Just contact me.
Fantastic. And then the only other things that are going on the Backdrop CMS.org website right now is that we have Eric Goldmantix is building out our content type for Showcase, and then hopefully we'll get that set up. And then I also wanted to take another hard look at the build our own forums issue. I noticed that WordPress has a couple of forums and they somehow managed to keep them under control. So I kind of wanted to kind of study how they managed to do that and see how their moderation works and how their categorization of different forum types work, and see if it's something that we want to set up on Backdrop CMS for people who need to have questions about installation or whatever it is. So doing kind of another investigation into that, and then probably at our next meeting we'll have an update with a proposal on how to do forums on backdropcms.org and see if anyone else thinks that sounds like a good idea or a terrible idea, whatever feedback we're going to get. So let's see, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the site that can always use improvement. Our Find Modules, Themes, and Layouts pages in particular, now that we have update data, like usage statistics data, it would be great to get that integrated into those pages and into our views so we can do things like search by most popular. So if anyone wants to lend a hand at getting that going, I think that would be probably our next most important item. And then we've got a bunch of follow-up issues on just design and aesthetics around the blog news section, events, service providers, all of that stuff. Just could use a little kind of aesthetic touch-up. In the news and announcements, we have, I've added that our next blog post should be an announcement about Jeff as our new core committer. I don't know who should write that. Nate, do you want to write that one up?
Yeah, I would think that would be best.
Okay.
I'd also like to include Doc Wilmon if possible, because not a lot of people actually know that he's a core committer either.
Okay. I think that sounds great. And we'll plan on doing that by next Thursday or Friday. Next week is DrupalCon. I know a lot of us are going to be there, so I'm not sure what our meeting situation is going to be like. I guess it'll depend on the internet access we have there, which probably will be good, but you never know with conferences. So we'll plan on having a meeting next week, but if for some reason that has to get canceled or postponed or run by somebody who's not at DrupalCon, we can send out a tweet asking for help. And then our next newsletter is supposed to be coming out May 20th, which will be right after Backdrop 1.4 is out. So we'll be able to kind of work out some of the kinks in the latest release and then announce to our followers that it is ready for testing or ready for use. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Nate for updates on Backdrop CMS, the project.
Yeah. Okay, so the next bug fix release is version 1.3.6, which we've started accumulating a fair number of fixes since our last bug fix release. But with the 1.4 release coming up so soon, it's likely that the last version of 1.3.6, or the 1.3 series, will come out May 15th, probably the same day as the next release. But we're still fixing issues in 1.3 for the time being, so there will be one last release for people that aren't ready to make the jump to 1.4 when it comes out. Although the way things are looking, it's really going to be mostly an extension of functionality and it's pretty unlikely to affect anybody's site on upgrades. But the option is there for the more cautious of the Backdrop users out there. So 1.4.0 is the next minor release, and that's coming up in 10 days, which is really exciting and also really scary because we have a lot of things that are really close or getting really close, but not a whole lot of things that are actually merged into the mainline branch. What we've got so far is references module is in pretty much its final form, well tested, well integrated, and heavily reviewed. And so that's great that redirect is all in place and ready to go. The next item we've got on the list here is references module, which Mike has been doing a tremendous amount of work on. Mike, do you want to give us an update on references?
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry, I was trying to talk before, but couldn't. I have not gotten anywhere near complete with this. I had a bit of things happening here. I took a job 3 months ago, partly under the hoping that the agency would help sponsor some open source contributing, but apparently they only sprint 3 hours a month on open source stuff, and they tell you what you need to be sprinting on. Anyway, they did not support any Backdrop stuff, and over the past month I've been trying really hard to make it work with them, but it did not work with them. So, so unfortunately I have not had any time to work on it, and so I'm not sure how I'm going to have time to do it over the next 10 days, considering we're all going to DrupalCon. So unfortunately, I'm a big failure.
That's well, let's not say it that way. I mean, we still have things that we can work on, but let's see, 10 days. Yeah, if it's in the state that you say it is, I think it would be foolhardy of us for it to try and rush it at this point.
Yeah.
Which is
I'd rather just get it released as a contrib module for people to use first.
Yeah, I think that's a much safer option anyway. But what we'll do, I like this idea of a contrib module anyway, because first of all, it always could have been a contrib module from the start. We just wanted a de facto standard, which is why we wanted it in core. But that will give us some opportunities to optimize it and to provide like upgrade paths, which are going to be hard to test, but are really important because nobody's going to be using this new module that we've written. They're all going to be using node reference, user reference, or entity reference. And so figuring out how we're going to help those people move, maybe it's not even part of references module, maybe it's a separate thing, but how we get people to move from that to this is important that we consider.
Well, I think that's sort of a shortcoming in, has been a shortcoming in Drupal, that once you create a field, it's sort of locked in place and you can't switch it to another field type or something like that. You can't switch like a text field to a number field, even if all the values in the text fields are numbers. So I've been thinking like some sort of like field operations or field editing module that actually lets you convert one type of field into another type of field and essentially goes through and creates a new table and copies over all the values and tells you if they all made it properly. Might be an interesting solution. And then you could do something like change this field from a node reference into just a reference module field. And it'll tell you like, oh, there's this many records, putting the values from one to the other, it looks like all of them have the exact same value. There's no type mismatches or anything. And then, yeah. Does that sound like an interesting idea?
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to take some work.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Yeah, this is sort of a good opportunity to try that. So if we just try this little thing with having a way to convert the individual reference fields to the common reference thing, that might be a good test case for how we might do it on a larger thing. So
Yep.
So we can maybe come up with a little test thing for this, and then maybe expand it into something larger.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a good plan. And really, our capability to do that is pretty. It's well within possibility and not very difficult as far as like because in our world we're only dealing with MySQL tables because users can't use alternative backends. And so it's really, and we know what columns the old tables are in and what the new tables are in, and then we can basically, if it's a matter of mapping, then we could just do some kind of, single SQL queries to like remap the data from one table to the other.
Yeah, it would just require sort of like coming up with a case from each one type to the other type and a little, function to do that.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, let's keep updating. I'm not sure if the issue has been updated with what we've just said, but let's update
I'll
the
update the issue, and then I'm going to move the reference module into contrib at some point.
Yes, that would be excellent. Okay. Cool. All right. Let's see. Let's go on to the theme. Wes, issue 1361.
Yeah, so last week I got the theme in a repo that we're collaborating in to match up the layout and theme stuff and make sure it all works well. I'd be interested to have like new default layout or the new default config because like with what's the default layout if we disable the old layouts and all that stuff, but I just want to go through and see if having different layouts changes anything, which shouldn't, but I don't. I'm skeptical that that'll actually be the case right now. So I want to do that, and then there's some tickets in the contrib repo, which I'm still using as like to keep track of what I need to do. And yeah, some bugs and questions or whatever. And there are a few that are marked need help for stuff that other people could jump in on. Some of them are more back-endy. Some of them are very front-endy. So yeah, and then if anyone wants to help with something that's not marked needs help, just let me know, and I'm sure it's fine. I love help. That's it. But yeah, I'm gonna be banging on this a lot this weekend. I will be getting married the weekend after, so my time is dwindling quickly before the release. So, ta-da!
Oh man, a wedding and a software release. One of these is much more important than the other, Wes, at least in terms of your life, and it's not the software release. All right, excellent. So new core layouts, issue 698. Jen, do you want to take kind of the lead on the update on layouts?
So we got a subset of layouts from Radix ready to go in core. Andy has been doing a bunch of work on it. Wes did a little bit of work on all of the Bootstrap stuff in his theme as well. So last week I tried to kind of marry the two together. I took all of the layouts that we had, I think, an original pull request from Doc Wilmot, and updated them with more layouts as we got feedback from the community. I took Andy's style sheet and put that on there, and then I tried to grab Wes's style sheet and replace it, and everything completely exploded. So I put Andy's back. But I think it would be good to get the two of you on the same page about what we want to do with that Bootstrap style sheet. And it looks like you're kind of already doing that, trying to figure out whether it should be aggregated or not initially so that we can figure out what the issues are. And then, Andy, I know you've got some debug code in there so that you can see there's like background colors so you can see if things are in the right regions or not. So I think we just need to do a little bit more testing on that and see what we need to do to figure out how to get it ready. So I know you guys are working on that already. I would love to get some feedback, Nate, from you on our solution for how to include the Bootstrap grid system style sheets. The way that I implemented it in the latest pull request was to add a library from the layout module that included a JavaScript file and the Bootstrap style sheet. And I was thinking we could use that JavaScript file to do the browser detection to figure out whether Flexbox was necessary or not, and then switch out the style sheet with the float fallback. So the library contains both of those elements, and then we can attach the library to any layout in the info file by adding library square bracket in the name of the library. But there is a little hiccup in that, because right now defining libraries requires both the module name as well as the library name, and our info file syntax doesn't really support that. So I had a couple of different ideas about how we could do that, like if you did the key in the array syntax as like the module name or something, but it seemed just kind of messy any way I could think about doing it. So I'd love some feedback on that. And then also, like, where we want all this code to live. Is the layout module the right place to define that library, or should it be in system? So just kind of getting a little code review in terms of where should we put all of the code that brings this stuff together, I think would be super beneficial. And if I think Wes and Andy can figure out CSS stuff, I can work on the library stuff, and we can figure out how to get it all done. It looks like we kind of have a consensus on which layouts we chose from Radix. We took layouts that all have not only a header and footer region, but also a top and bottom region. And we tried to do some standardizing on the names of those regions, so it's always top and bottom. We standardized on the names of sidebars, like when they get 1s and 2s added, so that if you try and change from one region to another, you're not going from like a sidebar column to an inner column. So hopefully that'll kind of make sense to people when you start to see how everything fits together. But yeah, it's starting from Radix and then trying to do a bunch of cleanup. There's also some questions about, and I don't know, Wes, if you have thoughts on this, but which Bootstrap classes we should be including in the layout markup by default. I think right now we have one layout class, it'll say like L-sidebar, and then we have one Bootstrap class, which is the number of columns. But there's also like push and pull classes and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it seemed kind of arbitrary as to which ones were included and not in the Radix stuff. So we could maybe use another set of eyes on that. Maybe we should compare, Wes, your templates to the ones that are in there and see what we think about that. And I know, Andy, you had some feelings on that too. And then Andy also had some pretty good feedback about what we should do with the info files. So right now in Layouts and Core, all of the info files included the default region for content, even though they had a region named content. And then when I took those out, I realized that that line that we had indicated wasn't necessary was necessary, because all of our core layouts were using it. We'd never tested a layout without including that line. So I fixed that, but Andy said, why don't we just leave that in there anyway, because anyone who's working on a layout is likely to copy a core layout. And so then there's other things that are in the layouts that we're not using in core, like the style sheets line. We're not going to be using anymore if we're going to be using the library line instead. So maybe we should just leave everything in a layout info file commented out with some documentation about how it's used, like we did in the current core layouts with the default region. And then that would make it easier on theme developers to be able to copy those. So that's not in the pull request right now, but Andy, I just want to say I think that's an excellent idea. I went through and removed it all, and then Andy's like, wait, we need that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's smart. So we should probably put that back in as well, and I can work on that too. So I think it feels like we're close with layouts as long as we're on the right track. But if we look at someone does a code review of this and goes, oh my gosh, this is totally not the right way, we need to rethink it, then we're not close, and we should figure out if that's going to be an issue for release or not. I feel like where we are right now, it's totally realistic to get in. We just have some minor cleanup bits left. But if we're going down the wrong track, then it might not be realistic real quick. So that's where we are.
Okay, so a little bit of a concern there. I can't imagine who that someone would be that would tell you that this needs to be totally done a different way.
I have an idea.
All right. Well, that's those are main items. We've got issue 1087, which is improving the rich text editor, which is a meta issue with a bunch of sub-issues, most of which are actually bugs, not features. But the one item on there that I really want to make sure we get done before the release is the upgrade of CK Editor, which from other people that have tested this, it's mostly just plop it in. But there's some great features in the new version of CK Editor that we also could utilize, like drag and drop uploads or something of that sort, which would be cool, but probably, well, unless someone else has the time to start taking a look at it, probably not something that will happen before 1.4. But for starters, let's just get it updated so that it's there, and so that we get all the bug fixes from CK Editor, and then we can work to expand it in the next release if necessary, which it will be. So it's always necessary to keep improving the rich text editor. Let's see, other items that we've got that weren't on the agenda for 1.4 but are going to happen, or just one item actually that is really important, is Project Browser. Project Browser is issue 1399. Oh, Jen, you gave this another look this week. I was derailed by the testing framework. Could you give the update on Project Browser?
Sure. So Project Browser looks fantastic. I went through kind of a super nitpicky, detailed review of like, this word should be this other word in the user interface, but it works really well. It lets you browse the modules, themes, and layouts. You can add as many or as few as you want to a queue. You can install them. It'll go through and install them one at a time. Then it'll ask you if you want them turned on or not, enabled or not. You can enable them, and then it'll take you back. It'll even turn on like your theme. It gives you buttons to turn on your theme. It's super slick. I think it's totally ready. And what I did is I created a follow-up issue that was specifically a design review, because I think what we should do is put it in when it's functionally ready, and we can clean up the aesthetic of it at any time. There were a couple of little things that I thought were usability issues, like I couldn't find the search box because it was in the sidebar. And on all of the other UIs and Backdrop, like on the modules page, the search box is right at the top. So I just had a recommendation to move it. So I added a comment, and then DocWoman went and moved it like instantly. So I think that one's looking really great. I think it might need another code review. I did a lot of interface review, and then I consulted the code where the thing was added, but I didn't do a really detailed code review. But it functionally works fantastic, and I'm really excited to see that go in.
Cool. Yeah, I've given it several code reviews. It's really, really close. That would have happened this past week had we not been derailed, but it'll go in this week, obviously, because we're running out of time. But it's gonna make it. It's gonna happen for real, and it's really exciting. We had a really awesome feature suggestion that one of our newer contributors made. That's really a great idea. And that's that right now we have this limitation when you do a config import across different sites that it asks you to manually turn on each and every module that isn't enabled on the first site, which can be, that in itself is a little bit of a headache. So once we fixed that problem, the suggestion was, well, now that we know all of the modules that own all of the config files, once we start storing that information, we could not only say you need to turn on these modules, but if you didn't have those modules and you had installer module turned on, it could actually install those modules on the remote site too, which would make for a badass demo of setting up an entire site on your local host, installing modules, configuring them, and then doing an import of config and having that also download the modules all at once. It would be pretty sweet. All right. So that's it for Project Browser and all of the features, mainline features that we're hoping for 1.4. There's still a number of other pretty large features, mostly around UX and layouts that are queued up in the pull request queue that I'm going to try to be working through and getting most of those merged. And there's some really exciting things in there, adding classes to regions, optimized conditional selection, some real improvements to our dialogues, a lot of really great stuff that is in the queue that is pending review. All right, it's Thursday. Every Thursday is Backdrop Day. We hang out in the GitHub issue queue, github.com/backdrop/backdrop issues, and in Gitter, which is a chat channel that you can use through your web browser, gitter.im/backdrop/backdrop-issues. And that's where we are going to be for a little while. Jen and I are packing up and heading out this evening, so we will be having a short day, but we will be doing Backdrop until we head to the airport. We have an IRC channel. We're still there some of the time, but Gitter is really the way to go these days, and a Reddit channel if you're interested in talking about things that are just peripheral to Backdrop, that don't actually involve the improvement of the software. reddit.com/r/backdrop. Upcoming events, you can get a list of them at backdropcms.org/events. There's also an iCal feed that you can get from this agenda here. I'm guessing, Jen, you want to say something about OS Bridge?
Yeah, so I think, Mike, you'd mentioned something about trying to do some kind of a backdrop thing at Open Source Bridge. It's in Portland in June, I think. I don't know if you're planning on going to that or not, but it might be good for somebody to give a talk on Backdrop there if they are going.
Yeah, I can do that, especially since I also agreed to give a talk on Backdrop at the not next week, but the following next month, Portland Drupal Users Group.
Fantastic.
So,
And then I also noticed OSCON is it's right after our release. It's May 16th through 17th, and that's in Austin. And I don't know that we have anybody going to that, but that would be a good place too. So if you guys hear of anyone who's going and interested in Backdrop and wants to hand out stickers, it's probably a little late to do an actual talk. Let us know. We'll send some stickers. But yeah, I think it would be great if we could try and get a little more involved in the larger open source world. We've been doing a lot of kind of preaching to the choir in terms of talking to Drupal, which is good because our initial community are Drupal people, but it would also be good to get general open source people aware that Backdrop is a new thing. So, all right. Yeah, otherwise we have upcoming events on our website. You can check about all the ones that people have added there. But yeah, short term, we've just got DrupalCon on our mind because that's next week. Let's see. Beginning Backdrop.
have we thought about having a sprint at some point at or near the DrupalCon next week?
We have thought about it. So Nate and I will be at DrupalCon. We do not actually, we're not planning on attending sessions, but we're going to be nearby and probably sprinting on Backdrop because we're so close to release.
You're going to be sprinting the whole time, straight through entire.
We don't know where, or I feel like we're going to have to scope out the venue and see what our options are. Like there's probably a coder lounge at the hotel. There's probably some kind of coder lounge at the event. I don't know the lay of the land. So I would say
what you're saying is that if we're going to be at DrupalCon, that we should keep our ears peeled for you saying where the awesome Backdrop coding sprint room is.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll probably put it on Twitter. Yeah, and we'll say something in like the Gitter log or whatever. We'll try and make as much noise as we can once we figure it out. But we don't have anything official scheduled as of yet, just because we don't know where we're going to be doing it. We want to find something that'll be convenient for everyone that's there, but also delicate on how we go about it. So yeah, that's the plan. And I think it would be good to do some kind of a Backdrop party thing. Last year at DrupalCon, we had everybody meet up at a bar that was nearby and just kind of hung out and chatted, and people ate food and people drank drinks, and we all just had kind of a little Backdrop celebration. I think it would be great to do something like that again. But again, last year we got there and figured out where it would be a good place to have the merriment, and then we announced it on Twitter, and then whoever came, came. So we'll probably plan on doing the same thing again this year too. All right. Well, I think that's all we had on the official agenda. Does anyone have anything else we should talk about while we're all here? $4.58. Oh. Yeah, maybe Wes and Andy and I should stay on and talk about layouts. That would be good. We could do a separate hangout, or we could just keep talking. Whatever you guys want. All right. Well, and I think that's it. We'll figure out our layout plan, and we'll see all of you guys next week, unless we can't have a meeting. The plan is to have a meeting. We'll just play it by ear. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for watching, everyone, too.